It's a little bit hard for me to say exactly what Bodies and Pleasures is about. It's a book about the philosophical value of the work of Michel Foucault, the philosopher I did my dissertation on, a French philosopher who lived from 1926 to 1984. And when in the 80s, soon after his death, there was a lot, it was just being, I guess, disseminated in English, and there were just beginning to be American scholars paying attention to that body of work. And there was a lot of political criticism of Foucault, oftentimes from leftist thinkers, but because more rightist thinkers weren't actually reading it yet. But the criticism, one of the main criticisms, was that the work would lead to political quietism, that it left people feeling that there was no point in doing any kind of social justice work, trying to change anything, because we were all basically trapped in power networks and unable to make any difference. And I didn't think that was true. And I didn't think that was true not just because as a scholar of the material I saw other things there, but mainly I didn't think it was true because its effect on me had not been to make me believe that there was no point in being politically active or hoping for change in the future in any way or anything like that. Quite the opposite. When I read his works, I felt like I was for the first time getting a real description of the world that I had lived in and saw around me. It was so thrilling, really, to see these things worked out in descriptions and analyzed in historical development for the first time in ways that I believed were really right, were true to my own experience, I should say. So instead of feeling paralyzed by the work, I felt energized, and it was open. He doesn't present, an ethical program. Here's what we all should live, how we should live, or here's what we should do politically. He never does that. In fact, he speaks against doing that. He says that's not his place. People need to make their own decisions. But here are some tools, he says. Here are some tools for thinking about things. Here's some information that you might want to consider when you try to do your own analysis of this or that situation. I found it all really useful. And so Bodies and Pleasures began with that idea that, and it's a very simple thesis. The thesis is, I'm going to show you why that criticism of Foucault, the criticism that his work leads to political paralysis, is false, at least in some cases. That's an easy, simple thesis. Of course, the book does a whole lot of other things at the same time, and I think that's why it's been fairly popular. It talks about dealing with being lesbian. It talks about embodiment. It talks about pleasure. It talks a lot about me. Not so much because I'm trying to highlight my own life story or anything, but more because I think, although I grew up believing that I was isolated and unlike anybody else in the whole world, I've really come to believe as an adult that a lot of things I care about and a lot of the ways that I feel are very common. And so the book is intended to appeal to other people who might feel the same way, even if they haven't had the same exact experiences. And I think it has been able to do that pretty effectively. I get emails even still from people in the middle of reading the book. And it's usually while they're in the middle, before they finish. I don't know what that means. Maybe that's not so good. But oftentimes about 2/3 of the way through, some grad student will email me in the middle of the night and say, I remember now why I decided I would go to grad school in philosophy, and that's always just really nice. You can bring your own life and your own body, your own pleasures and pains into your work in an overt way, and I think it can enrich it. Not to make it into some sort of confessional in a pejorative sense, but to make it more common, to make it more real to people. So that's Bodies and Pleasures.